The studio can be understood as an expanded head. So instead of the thoughts just moving a few centimeters across one's brain as they do from memory to frontal lobe and so on, it's like the walk around the studio where it's not a 5-centimeter journey, it's a 10-meter walk between the drawings or the different fragments in the studio. How does one make sense of the world with the tools and the techniques of the studio? I'm William Kentridge. I'm an artist who lives and works in Johannesburg in South Africa, where I've lived all my life. When COVID started in 2020, I knew there would be many months when one wouldn't be traveling, where for the first time I'd have an extended period in the studio without any other obligations. So I started making these series of films about life in the studio, both showing the making of work, the physical making of work, how you make a drawing, but also metaphorically looking at how the studio is a microcosm or a macrocosm of the kind of construction of thoughts in one's head. The series is called Self-Portrait as a Coffee Pot. So the exhibition contains both the drawings that were made during the 3 years of making the series of 9 half-hour films. And in part of the exhibition, we actually show those 9 films, so you can sit for 4 hours and watch the 9 films if you wish to. It's primarily an exhibition on the ground floor of drawings. Sometimes very large, the size of the walls of my studio, which become a kind of backdrop for it. The series was made with the idea that everything happens in the studio. So the first section of the gallery is sort of clear gallery space of the walls, on drawings on colored walls showing the work. And then the third room is an evocation rather than a recreation of the studio. It's about accumulation, it's about mess, it's about overabundance of different fragments of thoughts, of papers, of ideas. If you watch the series of films, at some moment, every work that is on the exhibition comes into focus on the screen, either for a longer or shorter period. But it's the first time we're showing these drawings together and together with the films. It must probably be the only time they're all seen together. The large drawing was very much the backdrop for one of the scenes. Drawing large enough that 2 of us could sit underneath it and have a conversation under the shade of the tree. And also something to show kind of a big physicality of drawing, where the size is something you can't just do with your knuckles. It's not a small drawing, you need the expansive space for it. And the other drawings range from small drawings that are like the film stills in the episodes, to kind of all the COVID numbers as they grew, to a large landscape that we needed for a brass band to walk in front. So they're all drawings that are provoked by what the episodes need, but then become drawings in their own rights. There's some drawings which are animations, which are erased and added to and erased and added to many times to get the movement of different objects and different things. The landscape, the figures over here that transform from one thing into a... These are all drawings that have the smudge of transformation in them, that were one thing and became something else. On the one hand, they're drawings, but on the other hand, they're kind of what's left after the film is made. So the peonies also work as a kind of backdrop for a conversation in the studio. They're done as an ink drawing on these different sheets of paper, but there are also extra petals, extra fragments that get added after extra fragments of paper torn and pinned to it. So it's not an erasure with an eraser the way the charcoal drawings are, but it's changeable with adding paper, subtracting paper. The glyph sculptures start as torn paper silhouettes, and then the torn paper is expanded with wax and cloth and cardboard into something that has dimension. And then when that is turned into bronze, when that is molded and cast in bronze, it gains a weight. And so they have a kind of a heaviness to the words, but they're arranged on shelves much as like lines of text, so you can remake the text, as it were, by changing the position of objects on the shelf. So they don't have a literal meaning. You couldn't quite make a rebus out of putting the different ones next to it, but it's as if they are wanting a meaning to be made, that there's a possibility of a meaning inside them. Some of these are then expanded into the sculptures, but they all start as the most ephemeral, just torn paper shapes, and gradually accumulate their weight and mass. So I've always worked with printmaking. And printmaking, even if you're making an image, is very related to printing of books, of words. Words have often been part of the text. Obviously with films, there's from silent films where you had an intertitle that would tell you what was happening, what people were saying, or to the way we watch films now, very often with the text. Even if it's in English, we still have an English text at the bottom of the screen, exciting music being played, things like that. So the text on top of an image is a kind of a form that we're all familiar with in the world today, maybe more than in the past. And over the years, somehow more and more fragments of text, or sort of unsolvable riddles, texts that are at the edge of making sense but don't make a clear sense, so that you've got to make an imaginative leap. You've got to be generous towards the text for them to be coherent. And those have come more and more into the work. There's always a kind of a migration of images from one form to another. Something starts as a torn paper silhouette, it becomes a sculpture. The sculpture is then used as a drawing. The drawing makes its way into the series of films and back into prints. There's a kind of promiscuity of the movement of images across different mediums. And they're all of them possible ways of thinking, of allowing thinking through the material. Thinking with paper, thinking with cardboard, thinking with ink. And that's an essential part. So it's not as if something is worked out in advance and then executed. It allows the material and the physical making to allow ideas to emerge, to develop.